So now we have Oddworld 3 Munch's Oddysee, which was released 3 years after Oddworld 2 in 2001. Now at this point in Abe's life, he's on top of the world, and has taken over Tanner as basically a mascot for the PlayStation, Windows, and MS-DOS. Now if you saw my review of Oddworld 2, you know I hold that game in high regard, but this one is often considered the best in the trilogy, and rightfully so. It had a lot to establish to the original formula in the prequel. So let's start up and see what makes this game so special by many people. Just like the last two, the story begins with what, you're not going to say this time? Alright, fine. The story begins with what seems to be a narration by a creature known as a Gabbit, who explains that one time there were lots of Gabbits. But that was before webs came and the other Gabbits disappeared. Once that happened, he couldn't find anyone. His name is Munch, and ever since that happened, he sang for other Gabbits, but none sang back. Until one night. On that evening, he heard what sounded like another Gabbit calling back to him, so he headed to shore and decided to investigate. He thought that his loneliness was over and that he had found someone. But as it turned out, it wasn't a Gabbit. It was really a trap. Then it happened. Munch got caught in the trap. Who could do such a thing? Well, Munch was about to find out. Eventually, a flying craft came and abducted Munch. It turns out this was being told to Abe and the other Mudokons by an oracular known as the Almighty Raisin, who tells them that Munch was then taken to Viker's labs. He tells them that if he wishes to find his brothers, he has to rescue Munch from Viker's labs. But when Abe asks how, the Almighty Raisin tells him to find the big well, and as he begins to say what to do next, he falls asleep. And the other Mudokons decide to leave. And then, say it with me one more time, the adventure begins. Viker's Labs is headed by Viker scientists known as Irwin and Humphrey, who make pharmaceutical products. Humphrey decides to use Munch as his new test subject. He implants a sonar device inside Munch's head, intending to use him as a slave. Irwin at first believes this to be a mistake, but Humphrey explains to him that he believes Munch can be used to take the other trapped animals to give the two of them more time to work on their products. Erwin then decides that this is a good idea after all. However, Munch is able to escape with the help of some creatures known as fuzzles, which the Vikers often use for tests. Meanwhile, Abe and some other Mudokons finally make it to the big well. And Abe is knocked in and gets shot to where Viker's Labs is, conveniently hovering right above the well. Meanwhile, Munch finds an exit and falls out right on top of Abe, and the two plummet together to the forest. When they see the almighty Raisin, he tells them their fates. As it turns out, Munch is the last living Gabbit. The other Gabbits have been used for lung transplants for chain-smoking gluckins, and Gabbit eggs have been used to create a food product known as Gabiar. As it turns out, Abe and Munch's fates are intertwined. The Raisin tells Munch that if he ever wishes to see Gabbits again, it will be because he helped Abe, and to do so he must go to Viker's Labs. The last can of Gabiar is to be auctioned off. In order to achieve this, Abe and Munch must work together. Viker's Labs is heavily guarded and nearly impenetrable. To get in, they must use a gluckin known as Lulu. And according to the Raisin, the most pitiful and incompetent excuse for a gluckin. They must make Lulu rich by possessing other gluckins and donating their fortune to Lulu's fund, until Lulu eventually reaches the rank of Gluckstar. This way, they will acquire the fortune needed to win that last can of Gabiar. And inside Viker's Labs, Abe will find his unborn brothers. The big Raisin then begins to tell him what to do next after finding Lulu, but then he falls asleep. There's also a bit of a subplot about how the Gluckin Queen Lady Margaret needs new lungs, and Munch, being the last cabinet there is the target. There really isn't much to say here in terms of story, it's what you expect, and even throw in a little bit of romantic tension between Austin and As far as the gameplay itself goes, I really only need to mention Abe himself for just a bit. Other than being 3D and with a few new mechanics, it's exactly like it was in Oddworld 2. He plays exactly like he was there. The game is just as varied as the last one was, but I can't go without mentioning that they had a new throwing mechanic where you can only pick up one object at a time and throw it, or you can throw other characters too. But really that's all there is to say about playing as Abe. Other than that, he plays a few new mechanics, and in 3D, he plays exactly as he did in Oddworld 2. But as most of you know, that's not the main focus of this game. I have to assume the guys at Oddworld were starting to go a little crazy because there is an additional playable character, Munch. Oh boy. There is Munch. Now, out of water and hopping around on one leg, Munch is a lot less mobile than Abe, and his hopping sound can be a bit annoying, and he's also a lot slower. However, Munch is better at attacking directly through zapping through the sonar device which has been implanted in his skull. And he can also swim, and use a wheelchair when he's out of water too to go fast on land. Munch can also possess certain mechanical things, such as a snoozer or a crane. The snoozer he uses to attack enemies for the most part. And he can also often jump out of the water really high. So there you go, that's Munch in Munch's Oddysee. While it's definitely a big leap in terms of how characters go, the game still sticks to about 50% Abe, 50% Munch. I'm just showing that as an estimate here, but Abe is still a majority player character. Some levels are played only with Abe, some levels are played only with Munch. Most are played with both. Now get ready, because this is going to be a mouthful. There's a shaman who helps Abe and Munch out, giving him directions and stuff. And there are also certain eggs where if one player dies in a level with both characters, you can use an egg to bring him back. And then there are spoofs which you collect and use them to do things such as opening up certain places. And you can also chance to possess enemies as Abe by creating a possession orb through spoofs. You can possess sligs like in the last games, and now sligs can have a simple baton, or they can have guns, and sometimes they're big bro sligs, which are all bulked up and shoot cans as ammo. And different sligs can also have different levels of health. Some also have armor, which makes them more powerful. And then slogs and sloggies return, and they can be possessed too, and when they are possessed, they are killed automatically. And this time, for the most part, they are very hostile to anything that comes into their territory. And then there are also giant slugs too. And then there are Vikers and Interns, which can be armored or unarmored. Interns and Vikers both either slap you or shoot at you, although Vikers can also have saw blades to attack you with. Armored Vikers are probably the most powerful enemies in the game, and are fast too, which can make them pretty irritating. When interns and Vikers are possessed by Abe, they are killed automatically. And then there are Gluckins, which Abe possesses and uses them to donate their fortunes to Lou's fund. Except for some reason, they don't die in this game like they do when they were possessed in the last game. Not that it's really a problem or anything, but it just is not really explained. Enemies normally won't attack their possessed counterparts unless they're directly attacked, or in the case of Sligs, insulted 3 or more times. Abe and Munch can also drink certain cans, which help them to get new abilities, such as jumping really high, or running really fast, or they drink Sobe to heal their health, or in some cases, they even drink Invisible to go invisible. And it's always a nice touch. In this game, characters take multiple hit points to die, which makes sense. And then there are meeps, which need to be hurted at certain points. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is. And now there are different types of Mudokons Abe can talk to. He doesn't need to say follow me to them anymore, they'll just follow him. There are named Mudokons, and then there are scrubs. Scrub Mudokons are basically slaves. Named Mudokons, however, are Mudokons who are not slaves and who will work with Abe. Scrub Mudokons need to be saved. Named Mudokons don't, but they'll do certain tasks for you, such as chanting and fighting. Scrub Mudokons only will pull levers for the most part. And they can also be shot into wells and will chant for you when they get to a certain place where you need to be chanting. There is a system in the game known as Korma, where this game has multiple endings. In order to get good Korma, you need to make sure a good amount of the Mudokons and Fuzzles and Mudokon eggs are saved and are kept alive. Named Mudokons can also be brought back from death with certain spoofs. And they can also fight too. Named Mudokons, which are standard, just slap enemies to death, and Abe can join the fight too and help slapping the enemies to death too. But Mudokons can be upgraded if they're native to different statuses, such as Tomahawkers, which beat enemies to death, or the most powerful of the named Mudokons, and likely the most powerful characters in the game, aside from Abe and Munch, the Mudarchers, who just shoot at their enemies and kill them. And they are amazing. What is not to love about them? They make the game so much easier and so less stressful. And then Munch can talk to Fuzzles, which also need to be saved too. And Fuzzles can help with attacking characters. Or in really just enemies. And then there are Mudokon eggs, which you need to save at certain points in the game, and you have to be real careful about them because you have to use a crane and drop them into where they need to go. But they can break very easily. So be careful of that. Now, presentation-wise, there's really not much to say here either, because again, it mostly follows the same mold that Oddworld 2 created. The game is really still fun to look at, and we have a really good soundtrack. All this time, Josh Gabriel was joined by another composer, Michael Bross. I personally find it easy to tell which songs are the Gabriel songs and which songs are Bross songs. And that's really not a bad thing. The Gabriel songs still sound Oddworld-y, and the Bross songs are a nice change of pace. It's funny because the best soundtrack in the trilogy was composed by Bross. The Ambience one. Man, that song is amazing. If you don't agree, you're wrong. And plus, it plays at one point in a level with frickin' armored sligs and Mudarchers. I repeat, armored sligs and Mudarchers. Every argument you have is invalid. As far as the boss levels go, this time they're just full on. And they can actually feel threatening because they oftentimes enemies just tower over Abe and Munch. The second and third bosses are good and all, and are nicely composed, but man, that third boss level, man, it terrified the hell out of me when I was younger. And I know I'm not the only one. Here's where I feel like I'm going to upset some people because I do have some negatives. For one, there are some inconsistencies in this game compared to past Oddworld games. The Paramites feel like they were shoehorned in and that the level doesn't really need to be in the game. It's pretty uninspired and just feels like an excuse to throw Paramites in. And to make it worse, it's really not displaying the true characteristics of a Paramite. In Oddworlds 1 and 2, Paramites were never in packs this huge. They would be together, but they would often be hiding, with only one or two going to confront Abe. Until they got together, and then went in for attack when Abe came. This also doesn't feel like the right environment for them. Before they were in caves and other such places and made webs and other things, but here they're not doing that. And sometimes when there's a lone Paramite, it might still attack you, unlike in the previous games where Paramites only attacked if they were in pairs or backed up against a wall. Also, it is never really explained why the Paramites are here in such large numbers. It would make sense if they were an industrial holding area, but it doesn't seem like it's the case. And it's never really explained why they're all together in such a huge group. Also, now Scrabs apparently can run a herd, whereas before, they were very territorial and fought to death whenever more than one were together. Also, Paramites and Scrabs make different noises than they did in Oddworlds 1 and 2. And again, when Gluckins are possessed, they're not killed automatically. It wouldn't be so bad if at least they were explained why these changes are made. But that doesn't happen. I know this is kind of minor, but still, it's inconsistent and it's never really explained. Also, it was complete overkill to have that much of a difference between gameplay and Abe and Munch. Now, Oddworld did say that they were having trouble trying to keep Abe interesting, mostly because he was limited in his abilities, such as not being able to always directly attack, which is perfectly fine, but still, that much of a difference between Abe and Munch? I mean, it's not awful, except when Munch is hopping around on land in one leg, and I do see Munch in the big bro sligs and the armored sligs, and other sligs, and the Mudarchers is sort of a work in progress red, but still, he's not as enjoyable as Abe is. I like having the extra variety, but only to an extent, and it feels like this game tried too much. It would have been better if they had focused on making him as fun as Abe, and his swimming, zapping, and wheelchair, and hopping, and talking to fuzzle abilities. And there's also a few segments of the gameplay I need to pull up because, oh man, are they awful. I'm only going to talk about 3 in particular here. The slig battles in Reservoir Row are a pain in the ass. Playing with Munch and Fuzzles against Sligs is a pain in the ass.
In this case, the Slig gets a really early first start on fighting, and one of our Fuzzles died.
And then there's throwing Mudokons across a field of mines, which you need to detonate eventually. Oh god, throwing Mudokons across a field of mines that you need to detonate as well. And it's really stiff and really tight. I never thought I'd be so close to rage quitting in a classic Oddworld game. By far the worst part of the entire Oddworld trilogy. And just like the last 2 games, you press a few buttons on a title screen and you're treated to a demo of Driver 76. Yeah, it's not as awesome as Driver 3 or Parallel Lines, but hey, it still doesn't hurt. When it comes to the main gameplay, Oddworld 3 is a very interesting case. It does very well, and it's just as good, if not better than Oddworld 2. But that much difference gameplay with Munch, whether it's as good as his swimming and zapping abilities and talking to Fuzzles, or as awful as his hopping around on one leg and sound, it just seems unnecessary. But regardless, the game still is a lot of fun, so if you enjoyed Oddworld 2 and the way that game played out, you'll still enjoy this one a lot, just aside from a few iffy parts, and you'll like it. I can see why people love this game so much, but as you can probably tell, I prefer Oddworld 2. But I would definitely put this game above Oddworld 1. So there you go, I ranked all 3 games for you. Don't bother asking me. I can tell that this might start some controversy in the comments, so I'm just going to cut to the chase and give Oddworld 3 Munch's Oddysee a 4 out of 5. Well, there you go. I've gone through the entire Oddworld trilogy, and as many people would consider, the only Oddworld games worth talking about. And it was a lot of fun to do so, but you all know the story here. Oddworld foolishly got rid of the Oddworld licensing and shut down to some work on the Red Dead Redemption series. The Oddworld series certainly didn't die off, but it probably would have been better if it did, and it was being poured out in every possible way, and then shut down. Stranger's Wrath, a crappy isometric game for the Xbox, Windows, PS3, OnLive, PS Vita, iOS, Android, iOS, and Mac App Store. I'm just going to get this out of the way right now because there's no way I'm going to torture myself with this game for you guys. If you enjoy it, go crazy, but I'm going to stay pure and not going past this trilogy. Now if Oddworld were to say restart and purchase the Oddworld license and make some new games for PS4 and Wii U, it'd be easy money for me and be perfect, but we all know that's never going to happen. But damn wouldn't it be sweet. But that's enough of my soapbox, time to head off. So, thank you guys for watching the review, hopefully you all enjoyed, and as always, I'll catch you guys later.